I sat in silence while my two sons lied to my lawyer about my mental state, because I wanted to hear every word before I destroyed them. I'm 73 years old. My name is Victor Castellano. I spent 40 years building a commercial real estate portfolio worth $12 million in Scottsdale, Arizona. I've buried a wife, raised two sons, survived 3 recessions, and never missed a mortgage payment on any property I ever owned. And on a Tuesday morning in March, those two sons sat across from me in Richard Davenport's office and told him I had dementia. The office smelled like leather and old paper. Richard's been my estate attorney for over 20 years. We've closed deals together, restructured trusts, planned for Maria's passing. He knows me, but that morning, he didn't know what to believe. Greg spoke first. He's my oldest, 46, investment advisor, married with 2 kids in Paradise Valley. He wore a Navy suit, and that concerned expression people practice in mirrors. Dad's been declining, he said, calm, measured, like he was discussing a stock position. He forgets names, repeats himself. Last week he called me twice in one day asking the same question. Paul nodded beside him. My younger son, 43, corporate consultant, divorced 2 years ago. Though he'd been dating someone new for a while, he leaned forward, hands folded like he was in a therapy session. We're worried about his finances, Paul added. Last month, Dad tried to wire $80,000 to someone he called a friend, but when we asked who, he couldn't even describe them. I sat between them. I said nothing. Richard glanced at me. His pen hovered over a yellow legal pad. I could see the question forming behind his eyes. Is this true? I gave him nothing. No denial. No defense. I just watched. Here's what they didn't know. I heard every word, remembered every detail. I'd been remembering details since before they were born. Property codes, tax schedules, contract clauses, the exact interest rate on the first loan I ever took in 1979. But I let them talk, because when someone shows you who they really are, you don't interrupt. You let them finish. Greg pulled out his phone, scrolling like he was presenting evidence. He gets confused at dinners, tells the same stories. We've had to remind him what day it is. Paul nodded again. It's been worse since Mom passed. That one landed differently. Maria died 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 68 years old. We had 43 years together, and when she was gone, I didn't fall apart. I grieved like a man who knows grief, quietly, privately, without making it everyone else's problem. But Paul said it like I'd crumbled, like losing her had broken me. My jaw tightened, just slightly. Richard set his pen down. Victor, he said gently, do you understand why your sons asked for this meeting? I looked at him, then at Greg, then at Paul, and I nodded. Greg exhaled. Paul's shoulders relaxed. They thought I was agreeing, thought I was confused, thought this was going to be easy. Richard adjusted his glasses. They're concerned about your ability to manage your estate. They're requesting a conservatorship hearing. Conservatorship. That's the word people use when they want control without asking for it, when they want your signature on their terms. I thought about the folder Greg had brought, the notes Paul had prepared, the way they'd coordinated their answers like a rehearsed deposition, and I realized something cold and clear. This wasn't about concern. This was a takeover. They'd been siphoning funds for years, but with my recent big deals, they got greedy and decided to go for full control. Before you hear what happened next, drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. I want to know who's still out there that remembers what loyalty means. And if this story sounds familiar, hit that like button. You'll see why in a minute. Greg pulled out a folder, like he was presenting a case to a jury, not talking about his own father. It was black, leather-bound, organized with tabs. He slid it across Richard's desk with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. Not for me, but the motion was practiced. We've been documenting incidents, Greg said. Incidents. He opened the folder. Inside were printed notes, dates, timestamps, a timeline of my supposed decline. November 10th, Greg read. Family dinner at my house. Dad told the same story about buying his first property, twice in one evening. Didn't remember he'd already told it. Paul jumped in. November 18th. Dad called me asking what time Thanksgiving dinner was. I told him 3 o'clock. He called back an hour later and asked again. Richard wrote something down. I watched the pen move. Greg flipped a page. December 2nd. Dad couldn't remember our accountant's name. Asked me who handles his taxes. December 15th. Paul said. He scheduled 2 dentist appointments for the same day. Didn't realize it until the office called him. They went back and forth like that. A rhythm. Tag team. I realized they'd rehearsed this. Not the facts. They were making most of it up. But the delivery, the pacing, who spoke when. They'd planned this down to the breath between sentences. I noticed something else. Neither of them looked at me. Not once. When you're really worried about someone, you look at them. You check their reaction. You want reassurance that they're okay. But Greg and Paul kept their eyes on Richard, on the folder, on each other, never on me. That's when I knew for certain. Richard leaned back in his chair. These are serious concerns, he said carefully. But Victor's always been sharp. I've worked with him for 2 decades. He's never shown signs of... It's gotten worse since Mom died. Greg interrupted. There it was again. Paul nodded. Slower this time. Sadder. He hasn't been the same. I think he's lonely, isolated, and I think people are taking advantage of that. People? Richard asked. The $80,000 wire transfer, Paul said. That's not normal. Dad won't say who it was for. Just said it was handled. Greg folded his hands. We think someone's manipulating him. Maybe a caregiver. Maybe someone he met online. We don't know. But we can't let him keep making financial decisions until we figure it out. I almost smiled. Almost. Because that wire transfer, it was a deposit on a commercial property in Tucson. An off-market deal I'd been working for 6 months. The friend was a broker I'd known since 1998. The whole transaction cleared escrow 2 weeks ago, and I'd already flipped the property for a 32% return, but they didn't know that. They didn't ask. Richard tapped his pen against the pad. He was thinking. I could see him weighing it. 20 years of knowing me against 2 sons with a folder full of dates. Victor, he said quietly, is there anything you'd like to say? Greg shifted in his seat. Paul's hands tightened just slightly. They were nervous. Good. I took a slow breath. Let the silence hang. Let them think I was confused, struggling, trying to find words that wouldn't come. Then I thought about Maria, about the way she used to look at me when the boys were young and acting up. That look that said, let them finish digging, then show them the shovel. She always knew, and she'd have known this too, that these weren't my sons sitting across from me. These were 2 men who'd calculated the value of my estate and decided they were tired of waiting for their inheritance. Richard was still waiting for my answer. I wasn't ready to give it yet. The lawyer asked if I understood, so I answered with their bank account numbers. Richard set his pen down completely. Victor, he said, slower now, like he was talking to a child. Do you understand why your sons requested this meeting? I nodded. Greg exhaled. I heard it. A small release of tension. Relief. He thought I was giving in. Paul leaned back slightly. His shoulders dropped. He thought it was over. Richard folded his hands on the desk. Do you feel you're currently able to manage your finances appropriately? I paused for effect. Then I looked at Greg. I'd hired a private investigator months ago to confirm their finances. I said, your primary checking account is at Wells Fargo. The account number ends in 4472. The current balance as of last Friday was $41,618. Greg's face went blank. I turned to Paul. Your mortgage payment is $3,200 a month. You're 14 months into a refi you took at 4.8%. The lender is SunTrust. The property address is 4488 East Baseline Road, Tempe. Paul didn't move. Richard's pen had stopped mid-note. I continued. Greg, you and your wife bought a vacation condo in Sedona last year. You didn't mention it at Christmas. It's in an LLC under her maiden name, probably for tax purposes. The address is 220 Canyon View Drive. You're renting it out on Airbnb. The current occupancy rate is about 60%. The room was completely silent. I shifted my gaze back to Richard. Paul refinanced his car 8 months ago. A Tesla Model S. Monthly payment is $940. He's got $18,000 in credit card debt spread across 3 cards. One of them is a Chase Sapphire he opened in October. Greg's jaw was tight. His hands were flat on the table, but I could see the knuckles turning white. Paul just stared. Richard blinked. Once. Twice. I leaned forward. "You asked if I can manage my finances appropriately," I said. I just recited details about theirs, from memory, without notes. Should I continue, or have I demonstrated adequate mental clarity? Nobody spoke. I let the silence settle. Then I added, almost as an afterthought, the $80,000 wire transfer. That was a deposit on a commercial property in Tucson, off-market deal. I closed escrow 2 weeks ago and flipped it for a 32% return. The buyer's name was Kevin Morales. The broker was Tom Ridgefield. I've known him since 1998. The profit was $256,000, minus fees. It's already been reinvested. Richard stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Greg opened his mouth. I closed it. Paul looked at his hands. I sat back in my chair. "I don't have dementia," I said quietly. "I don't forget names. I don't repeat myself unless I'm making a point. And I've never, not once in 40 years, made a financial decision I couldn't explain." I gave it a moment to land. Then I looked at my sons. "What I do have," I said, "is a very clear memory of this meeting. Every word, every claim, every piece of paper in that folder." Greg's face had gone from blank to pale. "So here's what's going to happen," I continued. "Richard, you're going to note in your file that I'm competent, coherent, and in full control of my estate. No conservatorship, no hearings, no further discussion." Richard nodded slowly. He was still processing. I stood. "And gentlemen," I said, looking at Greg and Paul, "we're going to have a different conversation, very soon, about what happens when you lie to a lawyer about your father's mental state in order to take control of $12 million. I walked to the door. I opened it, turned back. "You should have asked me about the wire transfer," I said, instead of assuming I'd lost my mind. Then I left them sitting there, and that's when the real plan began. The first time I saw the missing $15,000, I didn't say a word. I just started counting. It was 2 years ago, October. Maria had been gone 6 months. I was sitting at my desk going through the monthly statements for my business accounts, something I've done the first Monday of every month since 1981. Force of habit. You don't build $12 million in real estate by assuming your accountant caught everything. Line item, 3rd page, $15,000 transfer. Memo line read, "Property tax, Phoenix." I'd already paid that tax. In August. I had the receipt in my files. I sat there looking at that line for a long time. Then I checked the signature authorization. Greg, my oldest son. He had access to the business account. Had since 2015, when I added him to help manage cash flow across properties. I didn't call him. I didn't ask. I opened a new spreadsheet and wrote down the date, the amount, and the memo line. Then I kept reading. 2 weeks later, $8,200. Legal retainer. Estate work. I hadn't hired anyone for estate work. Richard handled everything, and he billed me directly. I added it to the spreadsheet. Then I did something I should have done earlier. I installed monitoring software on every shared account, set up alerts for transfers over $5,000, started reviewing statements weekly instead of monthly, and I waited, because if it happened twice, it would happen again. It did. December, $12,400. Building maintenance, Tempe property. I called the property manager. No maintenance had been authorized, no invoices submitted. I added it to the spreadsheet. By the time Maria had been gone a year, I had 19 separate transfers, including several unlisted smaller ones, amounts ranging from $4,500 to $23,000. Total, $87,000. None of them are legitimate. All of them authorized by Greg or Paul. I didn't confront them. I documented. I pulled records, cross-referenced dates, saved text messages where they'd ask how I was doing, if I needed anything, if I was managing okay after Mom. The same week, Paul took $23,000 labeled Mom's Memorial Fund. He texted me, "Just thinking about you, Dad. Let me know if you need help with anything." The Memorial Fund never existed. He bought furniture. I found the receipt later, delivered to his condo in Tempe. A sectional sofa, dining table, king bed frame. Total, $2,100. He used his mother's memory to steal money for a couch. I added it to the spreadsheet. Greg was more creative. In 2019, he asked to borrow $62,000 for startup capital. Said he was investing in a fintech company with some guys from his firm. I wrote the check. He promised to pay me back within 2 years. He bought a boat, a 28-foot Sea Ray, docked at Pleasant Harbor. I saw it on his Instagram 6 months later. He'd tagged it. New investment paying off. I took a screenshot, added it to the spreadsheet. Paul borrowed $48,000 in 2020. Said it was for his divorce settlement. Legal fees were crushing him. He was losing everything. Could I help just this once? I helped. He remodeled his kitchen, granite counters, custom cabinets, high-end appliances. His girlfriend Jennifer posted photos during the renovation. I saved them all. Then there was the joint investment property. Both sons came to me in early 2021, said they'd found a duplex in Mesa. Great rental opportunity, but they needed $95,000 for the down payment. They'd split ownership, manage it together, pay me back from rental income. I gave them the money. The duplex never existed. I checked county records, pulled tax assessor files, searched every property database in Maricopa County. Nothing. They used that money to buy the Sedona condo instead. Greg's daughter got braces that year, paid in full, cash. Paul bought the Tesla. I added all of it to the spreadsheet. By the time they walked into Richard's office claiming I had dementia, I had 2 years of evidence. Every transfer, every lie, every text message where they pretended to care. The total came to $263,600, including the unpaid loans. My grief over Maria kept me silent. But silence wasn't forgiveness. It was preparation. I didn't lend them money. I gave them enough rope to hang themselves, and they did so with their own receipts. Back in Richard's office, after I'd recited their bank accounts, I reached into my briefcase. I pulled out a binder, 3 inches thick, black cover, tabs organized by year, then by son, then by transaction type. I set it on the desk between us. Since we're discussing my ability to manage finances, I said, let's review theirs. Richard opened it slowly. The first page was a summary sheet. Typed. Clean. Professional. Gregory Castellano, I said. Total. $132,700. Startup capital loan. Unpaid. Business account transfers for property tax and legal fees. Unauthorized. Joint investment property. Fraudulent. Richard's eyes moved down the page. Paul Castellano. Total. $130,900. Divorce settlement loan. Unpaid. Business account transfers for a memorial fund and building maintenance. Unauthorized. Joint investment property. Fraudulent. I paused. Combined total. $263,600. Richard flipped to the next tab. Printed bank statements. Every fraudulent transfer highlighted in yellow. Dates circled. Memo lines underlined. Next tab. Copies of text messages. Greg, November 2019. Thanks, Dad. I'll have this back to you by end of 2021. I promise. Paul, March 2020. You're saving my life. I'll pay you back as soon as the divorce settles. Next tab. Screenshots. The boat. The furniture. The Tesla. The kitchen remodel. Greg's daughter's braces receipt. I'd had Richard subpoena a copy as part of the investigation after seeing it mentioned in a Facebook post. I'd documented everything. Greg tried to speak. Dad, those were gifts? I said. He stopped. That's interesting. I continued. Because in writing, you called them loans. You promised repayment. You signed promissory notes for 2 of them. I flipped to another tab. Copies of the notes. Greg's signature, Paul's signature. Paul leaned forward. We didn't think you'd actually expect repayment, I finished. Or notice. Silence. Richard was still turning pages. He got to the Sedona section. I'd saved that for last. The joint investment property, I said. The duplex in Mesa. The one that doesn't exist. I tapped the page. You took $95,000. Told me it was for a rental property. Told me you'd pay me back from tenant income. Greg's face was white. There is no duplex, I said, but there is a property you bought, just not the one you told me about. Richard looked up. Turn to the red tab, I said. He did, and that's when they realized how deep I'd gone. This version presents the financial details more naturally through dialogue, making it easier to voice over while keeping all the key information intact. They bought a vacation home with my money and rented it out, while telling me I couldn't manage my own finances. The red tab had everything. Property records from Coconino County. Deed transfer dated 14 months ago. Purchase price, $320,000. Owners, Gregory and Paul Castellano. Down payment, $95,000 from my stolen funds, plus a bank loan for the remaining $225,000. Source of down payment, withdrawal from my business account. September 2023. Memo line, building maintenance, multiple properties. No building maintenance was ever performed. Richard stared at the deed. I continued. I found out by accident, I said. Paul posted a photo on Instagram, sunset view from a deck, tagged the location, Sedona, Arizona. I thought it was a vacation rental he'd booked. I pulled out another page, printout of the Instagram post. Then I saw another photo. 2 weeks later, different sunset, same deck, same location tag. I showed Richard the second post. So I got curious. Greg's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle flexing. I asked a realtor I know in Sedona to pull recent sales in that area. Found the property, pulled public records, both your names on the title. I let the weight of it settle. The address is 220 Canyon View Drive, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, mountain views. You're renting it on Airbnb. Current rate is about $350 a night. Occupancy runs around 60%. Paul's hands were shaking. That's $63,000 a year in rental income, I said. Before expenses. You've owned it 14 months. You've profited roughly $74,000. I turned to Richard. They stole $95,000 from me to buy an investment property. They're generating income from it. And 2 weeks ago, they sat in this office and told you I'm too incompetent to manage money. Richard closed the binder. He looked at Greg, then Paul. His expression had changed. He wasn't their father's attorney anymore, mediating a family dispute. He was looking at them the way you look at criminals. How did you remain calm? Richard asked me quietly. Knowing all this, I thought about that. About the night I found the Sedona property. The night I drove up there, 2.5 hours from Scottsdale, and parked across the street. Watched a family check in for the weekend. Watched them unload luggage. Kids running around the driveway, excited about their vacation. I sat in my truck and thought about Maria, about the week before she died, when she made me promise I'd take care of the boys, make sure they were okay, make sure they didn't fall apart after she was gone. I thought about how she'd feel knowing they used her death as cover to rob me, because anger without evidence is just noise, I said. I looked at my sons. I needed enough to bury them. Greg opened his mouth, closed it. Paul stared at the table. Richard took a slow breath. Victor, he said, what outcome are you seeking? And that's when I told him exactly what I wanted. The lawyer asked what I wanted. I told him I wanted them charged, not forgiven. Richard had his pen ready. I didn't hesitate. Full criminal prosecution, I said. Embezzlement, fraud, elder financial abuse, every applicable charge. Greg's head snapped up. Dad, I kept talking. I want restitution, every dollar returned, with interest. Paul's voice was barely a whisper. You can't be serious. I want them removed from my will entirely. No inheritance, no trust access, nothing. Richard was writing quickly. Greg's voice cracked. Dad, we're your sons. I looked at him, really looked at him. You stopped being my sons, I said. The day you decided I was too senile to notice you robbing me. The room went silent. Greg's eyes were wet. Paul was staring at his hands like he could make himself disappear. You used your mother's memory, I said quietly. You used my grief. You waited until I was alone and vulnerable, and you stole from me while pretending to care. My voice didn't shake. That's not what sons do, I said. That's what predators do. Richard set his pen down. I'll make the calls, he said. Phoenix PD has a white-collar crime unit. I know the detective who handles elder exploitation cases. I'll contact the district attorney's office. He looked at Greg and Paul. You should both retain attorneys. Immediately. Greg stood up. His chair scraped against the floor. This is insane, he said. His voice was louder now, desperate. You're really going to destroy your own family over money? I stood too. I'm not destroying anything, I said. You already did that. I'm just refusing to ignore it. I picked up my binder. The meeting's over, I said. I walked to the door. Paul called after me. Dad, please. I stopped, didn't turn around. You had 2 years to come clean, I said. You chose to call me incompetent instead. I opened the door. You made your choice, I said. Now you live with it. I left. Richard would handle the rest. And within 24 hours, everything changed. The detective didn't ask if I was sure. He asked if I had copies of everything. His name was Aaron Hollis, Phoenix PD, White Collar Crime Unit, 51 years old, 23 years on the force. Richard set up the meeting. He arrived at my house at 9 a.m. the next day. I made coffee. He accepted a cup. We sat in my office, the same room where I'd built the binder, tracked the transfers, planned every move. Mr. Castellano, he said, pulling out a notepad. Walk me through it. I did. It started with Maria's death, the grief, the isolation, then the first transfer, the $15,000 labeled property tax. He wrote quickly, efficient, didn't interrupt. I showed him the binder. He flipped through it slowly, pausing on certain pages, the promissory notes, the Instagram screenshots, the Sedona deed. This is extremely well documented, he said. I'm a developer, I said. I've been building cases for 50 years, just usually against contractors, not my children. He almost smiled. How long did this go on? He asked. 2 years of unauthorized transfers. 4 years if you count the unpaid loans. Total amount? $263,600, not including the ongoing income from the Sedona property. He wrote that down. And they had legal access to your accounts? Greg did. Business account. I added him in 2015. He was supposed to help manage cash flow, pay vendors, and handle property expenses. Paul, no direct access, but Greg gave him login credentials. I have the IP log showing Paul's computer accessing the account 47 times over the 18 months since I installed the monitoring software. Hollis looked up. You have IP logs? I installed monitoring software once I noticed the discrepancies, tracked every login, every transaction, every device from that point forward. He set his pen down. Mr. Castellano, I'm going to be very direct with you. This is one of the most thoroughly documented financial exploitation cases I've seen. Most victims don't even realize they've been victimized until it's too late. I'm not a victim, I said. I'm a plaintiff. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. He flipped back through his notes. Here's what we're looking at legally. Embezzlement. Elder financial abuse under Arizona Statute 46456. Wire fraud if any transfers crossed state lines. And potentially forgery if they falsified any authorization documents. They did, I said. I found 2 invoices for building maintenance that were never submitted to me for approval. Greg created them, signed my name, filed them as supporting documentation for the transfers. I handed him copies. Hollis studied them. That's forgery, he said. That's a separate felony. He closed the binder. I'll need to interview both of them. Do you have current addresses, workplaces? I pulled out a single sheet of paper. Everything typed. Greg's home address, office location, daily schedule, Paul's condo, his consulting firm's office, the gym he went to every morning at 6:30. Hollis took the page, looked at it, looked at me. You've been thorough, he said. I told you, I said. I know how to build a case. He stood. I'll coordinate with the DA's office. Given the amount and the evidence, they'll almost certainly file charges. You'll need to be available for interviews, depositions, possibly testimony if this goes to trial. I'll be available, I said. He shook my hand. For what it's worth, he said. I'm sorry you're going through this. I nodded. Thank you, detective, but I'm not going through anything. They are. He left, and I waited for what came next. He cried, he begged, he used his mother's name. I hung up. The call came 2 days later. Thursday afternoon. I was reading on the back patio. Greg's name on the screen. I let it ring 3 times. Then I answered. Dad. His voice was already shaking. Dad, please, we need to talk. I said nothing. The detective came to my office, he said, in front of my colleagues. He asked me to come to the station for an interview. Dad, this is insane. He was crying now. Full, heaving sobs. I'll pay it all back, he said. Every dollar. I swear. I'll sell the Sedona place. I'll liquidate everything. Just please drop this. I watched a hummingbird hovering near the feeder Maria had hung years ago. Paul's a mess. Greg continued. His girlfriend left. He's terrified. Dad, we made mistakes. We know that. But you're going to destroy us. You destroyed yourselves, I said quietly. He went silent. Mom wouldn't want this, he said. Different tone now. Harder. Desperate. She'd be horrified. Sending your own sons to jail? Over money? My hand tightened on the phone. Your mother, I said very slowly, would be ashamed that you're using her name to escape consequences. Silence. You stole from me while I was grieving her, I said. You created a fake memorial fund in her name. You used her death as cover. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Don't you ever use her to justify what you did. Greg's breathing was ragged. Then his tone shifted again. Anger now. You're really doing this? He said. You're really going to ruin us? My kids? Your grandkids? They're going to grow up knowing their grandfather sent their father to prison. Over money. You want that to be your legacy? My legacy, I said, is 40 years of honest work. Yours is 2 years of theft. We're family. You stopped treating me like family the moment you forged my signature. Dad, I hung up, set the phone face down on the table, went back to my book. An hour later, Paul texted, You're really going to ruin us over money? I stared at that message for a long time. Over money. Like it was about the dollars. Like it wasn't about trust. About betrayal. About looking your grieving father in the eye and asking if he's okay while you empty his accounts. I typed one sentence. You already ruined yourselves? I'm just making it official. I didn't hear from either of them again. Not directly. Their attorneys reached out to Richard, requested meetings, settlement discussions, offers to repay in exchange for dropped charges. Richard forwarded every request to me. I declined all of them, because here's what they still didn't understand. This wasn't about money. This was about showing them that actions have consequences, that you don't get to steal from someone and then claim family when you're caught, that some things can't be fixed with apologies and payment plans. Some things are just broken, and you live with that. They were arrested at dawn, the same time they used to call me asking for money. Detective Hollis filed formal charges 3 months after our first meeting. 2 counts of embezzlement, 3 counts of elder financial abuse under Arizona statute, 1 count of fraud related to the Sedona property, 2 counts of forgery. The district attorney's office took the case immediately. High dollar amount, clear evidence, cooperative victim. It was everything prosecutors dream about. Richard called me the morning the warrants were issued. They're executing them today, he said. I thought you should know. I thanked him, hung up, and I went about my day. I didn't go watch, didn't drive to their houses, didn't want to see it. But Richard called again at 8:15 a.m. Greg was arrested at his home, he said. Phoenix PD served the warrant at 6 a.m. Paul was arrested at his condo 20 minutes later. In front of neighbors? I asked. Yes, I thought about that. About Greg's upscale neighborhood in Paradise Valley, the HOA meetings, the country club families. Everyone knows everyone. About Paul's condo complex, young professionals, people he networked with. They'll post bail, I said. Already have, Richard confirmed. Both posted $50,000 within 3 days. Using what money? Joint accounts you haven't frozen yet. I almost laughed. They're using stolen money to bail themselves out of charges for stealing money. Essentially, yes. Their attorneys contacted Richard that afternoon, requested an emergency meeting, wanted to discuss plea options, restitution agreements, anything to avoid trial. What do you want me to tell them? Richard asked. Tell them discovery will be thorough, I said. Tell them I documented everything. and tell them I'm not interested in meetings. Richard paused. Victor, you understand this could go to trial. You'll have to testify. It could take months. I have time, I said. He was quiet for a moment. They're asking if you'd consider a settlement, full restitution plus interest in exchange for dropped charges. No, they're offering $300,000. That's more than you lost. I don't want more, I said. I want accountability. Victor, Richard, I'm 73 years old. I don't need the money. What I need is for my sons to understand that actions have consequences, that you can't steal from your father and walk away because you wrote a check. Silence on the line. Tell their attorneys I'll see them in court, I said. Richard sighed. I'll pass it along. That night I sat in my office, looked at the binder, the spreadsheets, the evidence I'd compiled over 2 years, and I thought about the moment Greg and Paul decided I was too old, too grief-stricken, too vulnerable to notice. The moment they stopped seeing me as their father and started seeing me as an opportunity. That's the moment they lost me. Not when I filed charges, not when they were arrested, but long before that, when they chose to betray me and assumed I wouldn't fight back. They were wrong, and now they'd learn what it cost them. Paul's girlfriend left, not because of the arrest, but because she realized who he really was. Her name was Jennifer. They'd been together 2 years, met through friends after his divorce. Nice woman, worked in marketing. I'd met her twice, once at a family dinner, once at a charity event Greg's wife organized. She found out about the arrest from a mutual friend, called Paul, asked if it was true. He tried to explain, tried to minimize it, told her it was a misunderstanding, that his father was confused and angry. She asked to see the charges. He showed her. She left that night, didn't take her things, didn't wait for an explanation, just said she couldn't be with someone who'd steal from their own father. Paul told me this later, much later, after everything was over. He said she told mutual friends she felt sick, knowing she'd been dating someone capable of that the money he'd spent on her, dinners, trips, gifts, might have been stolen. She wasn't wrong. Greg's situation was different. His wife, Amanda, stayed, but she moved into the guest room, stopped wearing her wedding ring. Their kids, my grandchildren, were 16 and 13. Sophie and Michael, old enough to understand something was wrong, too young to understand the full scope. Sophie asked to visit me. Amanda drove her over on a Saturday afternoon, didn't come inside, just dropped her off. Sophie sat on my couch, hands folded in her lap, her eyes searching mine. Papa, she said quietly, do you hate us? I looked at this girl, my granddaughter, 16 years old, smart, kind, nothing to do with any of this. No, I said. I love you very much. Then why are you doing this to Dad? I took a breath. I'm not doing anything to your father, I said. Your father made choices. Those choices have consequences. He said you're trying to destroy the family. Your father destroyed it, I said gently. I'm just refusing to pretend he didn't. She started crying. I moved to sit beside her. Didn't touch her. Just sat close. We talked for over an hour before she nodded slowly. Sophie, do you know what your father did? She nodded. He stole from you, from your grandfather, for years. She wiped her eyes. He said it was loans, that you gave him the money. Some of it was loans, I said. Loans he never repaid. The rest he just took, without asking. She was quiet. Love doesn't mean accepting betrayal, I said. It doesn't mean pretending bad things didn't happen just because someone's family. But he's your son. He is, I said, and I'm his father. And he stole from me while I was grieving your grandmother. She looked at me. I don't want you to hate him, I said. He's still your dad, but I need you to understand that what he did was wrong, and people, even family, have to be accountable for what they do. She nodded slowly. We sat there for a long time, and I realized something. This wasn't just about Greg and Paul anymore. It was about what legacy I'd leave behind, what my grandchildren would learn about integrity, about consequences, about standing up for yourself, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. They stood in court and said I gave them permission, while I sat 10 feet away, watching them lie under oath. The arraignment was 6 weeks after the arrest. Maricopa County Superior Court, Judge Margaret Thornton presiding. Greg wore a dark suit, clean-shaven, looked like he was going to a business meeting. Paul wore gray slacks and a white button-down. His tie was crooked. They stood before the judge while the charges were read. 2 counts embezzlement, 3 counts elder financial abuse, 1 count fraud, 2 counts forgery. The judge asked how they pleaded. Greg's attorney spoke first. "Not guilty, Your Honor." Paul's attorney repeated it. "Not guilty." I sat in the 3rd row of the gallery, right side, aisle seat. Greg glanced back once, saw me, looked away fast. Paul kept his eyes forward, didn't turn around at all. The judge set bail conditions. No contact with the victim, no access to shared accounts, travel restrictions. Trial date, 6 weeks out. I attended every pre-trial hearing after that. Motions to suppress evidence, discovery disputes, scheduling conferences. I didn't have to be there. Richard said I could skip them. Most victims do. But I went. Every time. Sat in the same seat, same row, same side. And every time Greg or Paul entered the courtroom, I made sure they saw me. I didn't glare, didn't make faces, didn't need to. I just looked at them, held eye contact until they broke it. Neither one could hold my gaze for more than 3 seconds. Their defense strategy became clear during discovery. Their attorneys argued the transfers were gifts, misunderstandings, family help that Victor later regretted. They claimed I was suffering early-stage dementia at the time, that my current lucidity didn't prove I'd been competent 2 years ago. They planned to argue I was vindictive, that Maria's death had changed me, made me bitter, that I was punishing my sons for moving on with their lives while I stayed stuck in grief. The prosecution's response was methodical. They had my medical records, full neurological evaluation from 6 months ago, ordered it after the arrest. Dr. Patricia Chen, one of the top neurologists in Phoenix. Her report, no cognitive decline, no memory impairment, no signs of dementia past or present. They had Richard's testimony, 23 years of legal work together, hundreds of contracts, deals, closings. He'd attest to my mental sharpness. They had my accountant, David Brenner, every quarterly review, every tax season, every financial decision documented and confirmed. They had the monitoring software logs, timestamps, IP addresses, digital fingerprints of every unauthorized transaction. They had the forged invoices, the fake building maintenance bills, Greg's signature next to my forged one. They had the Sedona property records, the Instagram posts, the Airbnb rental income statements, and they had the binder, all of it entered as evidence. The defense had nothing except a story about a confused old man who gave his sons money and forgot about it, a story that required the jury to believe I was simultaneously too impaired to remember authorizing transfers and competent enough to fabricate 2 years of detailed documentation. The trial was set for October 14th, 8 months after that meeting in Richard's office. 8 months of waiting, but I'd already waited 2 years to get here. What was 8 more months? I thought about Maria, about what she used to say when the boys were young and did something wrong. The truth always comes out. It's just a question of when. She was right. The truth was coming, and it was coming under oath. They asked if I remembered. I said I remembered every dollar, every lie. Every time they looked me in the eye and called it love. The prosecution called me on day 3 of the trial. I'd sat through 2 days of testimony. Bank investigators, forensic accountants, Detective Hollis explaining the investigation. My turn came on a Wednesday morning. The prosecutor was a woman named Angela Reyes, 42, sharp. She'd prosecuted financial crimes for 15 years. We'd met twice before the trial. She knew exactly what questions to ask. She started with background. "Mr. Castellano, can you tell the jury about your professional history?" I described it. 40 years in commercial real estate development. Started with a single duplex in 1981. Built a portfolio worth $12 million by the time I retired. "And your family?" I told them about Maria. 43 years of marriage. Her death 4 years ago. Our 2 sons, Greg and Paul. "Were you close with your sons?" "I thought so," I said. Angela walked me through the timeline. Maria's passing, my grief, the isolation that followed. "When did you first notice something was wrong?" October 2022. A transfer for $15,000. Labeled property tax. I'd already paid it. What did you do? I started documenting. She handed me a copy of the binder, projected it on the courtroom screen so the jury could see. Can you explain what this is? 2 years of evidence, I said. Every suspicious transfer, every unauthorized withdrawal, every lie they told. I walked them through it. The accountant, the transfer amounts, the Instagram posts, the Sedona property. Angela's voice was measured. Mr. Castellano, did you ever give your sons permission to take this money? No. Did you ever intend these transfers as gifts? No. Did you tell them they could access your accounts freely? No. She paused. Do you suffer from dementia or any form of memory loss? I looked directly at the jury. No. I remember every dollar they took, every lie they told, every time they looked me in the eye and asked how I was doing while they were emptying my accounts. The courtroom was completely silent. Angela nodded. No further questions. Greg's attorney stood for cross-examination. His name was Mitchell Parson. Expensive suit, silver hair, the kind of lawyer who thinks he can intimidate through tone. Mr. Castellano, you claim to remember everything. Is that accurate? It is. Everything, every conversation, every transaction, every detail from 2 years ago. The relevant ones, yes. That's remarkable for a 73-year-old man. I've been managing complex financial portfolios for 50 years, I said. Memory is part of the job. He walked to his table, picked up a document. You authorized your son Gregory to access your business account in 2015, correct? Yes. You trusted him with your finances. I trusted him to manage operational expenses, pay contractors, handle property maintenance, not to steal. Steal is a strong word. It's an accurate word. He shifted tactics. Mr. Castellano, you lost your wife. That's tragic. But isn't it possible, just possible, that in your grief, you authorized these transfers and simply don't remember? I looked at him for a long moment. My wife died, I said slowly. I didn't. Someone in the gallery coughed. Might have been a suppressed laugh. Grief doesn't cause amnesia, I continued. It doesn't make you forget signing away $100,000, and it certainly doesn't make you hallucinate 2 years of documentation. Parsons' jaw tightened. No further questions, he said. I stepped down, walked back to my seat in the gallery, and for the first time in 8 months, I felt something close to peace, because I'd told the truth, under oath, in front of my sons, in front of a jury, and the truth was simple. They stole from me. They lied about it, and no amount of legal maneuvering was going to change that. The accountant said I was sharp. Their lawyer had no response except silence. David Brenner took the stand the next morning. He's 61, been my accountant for 23 years, handles everything, personal taxes, business filings, quarterly reviews, estate planning coordination. If anyone knew my mental state across 2 decades, it was David. The prosecution established his credentials quickly. CPA, MBA from ASU, client list including commercial developers, investors, small business owners across Arizona. Then Angela Reyes asked the important question, Mr. Brenner, in your professional opinion, has Victor Castellano shown any signs of cognitive decline? David didn't hesitate. None whatsoever. Can you elaborate? I've worked with Victor since 2001. We meet quarterly to review financials. He's consistently sharp, detail-oriented, and engaged. He catches discrepancies I miss. He asks complex questions about tax strategies, depreciation schedules, liability structures. Has that changed since his wife's death? Not at all. If anything, he's become more meticulous. Angela pulled up a chart, comparative analysis David had prepared. It showed Victor's financial decisions from 2019 through 2024. Property acquisitions, sales, investment allocations, loan terms. What does this show? Angela asked. Consistency, David said. Before and after Maria's death, Victor's decision-making shows identical competence, same risk assessment, same attention to detail, same long-term strategic thinking. She projected the disputed transfers onto the screen. Did Mr. Castellano ever authorize these transfers to his sons? No. How do you know? Because every significant financial decision Victor makes, we discuss. Large gifts, loans, investments. He consults me for tax implications. These transfers, he pointed at the screen, never came up. Not once. Is that unusual? Very. Victor doesn't move $20,000 without running it by me first. Angela nodded. And in your 23 years working with Mr. Castellano, have you ever seen him confused about his finances? David almost smiled. Victor Castellano is one of the sharpest financial minds I've worked with. He built a multi-million-dollar portfolio from scratch. He understands markets, leverage, risk, timing. If he'd approved these transfers, I'd have documentation, written authorization, tax planning notes, something. And there's nothing? Nothing. Thank you, Mr. Brenner. Mitchell Parson approached for cross-examination. He tried the same angle he'd used with me, suggesting David might be biased, protective of a long-term client. David shut it down immediately. I'm a CPA. My license depends on accuracy, not loyalty. If Victor were impaired, I'd have documented it and recommended a financial conservator myself. That's my legal obligation. Parson pressed. But you admit he experienced grief after his wife died. Grief isn't dementia, David said flatly. I lost my father 2 years ago. I didn't suddenly forget how to read a balance sheet. The jury shifted. A few nodded slightly. Parson tried once more. Isn't it possible Mr. Castellano simply changed his mind about helping his sons? If he'd helped them, David said, there would be gift tax filings, loan agreements, documentation. There's none. These weren't gifts. They were unauthorized transfers. And Victor caught every single one. Parson had nothing left. No further questions. I watched David step down. He'd known me for 23 years. And when it mattered most, he told the truth. That's what loyalty actually looks like. Not covering for someone's crimes, but standing up for their character when it's questioned. When the foreman said, "Guilty," I didn't feel victory. I felt a quiet release, the weight of 2 years of betrayal finally easing. The jury got the case on a Friday afternoon. Closing arguments finished at 2:30. Judge Thornton gave instructions. The jury filed out at 3. Richard and I went to the courthouse cafeteria. Vending machine coffee, stale bagels, fluorescent lights humming overhead. 4 hours is good, Richard said. Quick deliberation on a case this complex usually means the evidence was clear. I nodded, didn't say much, just sat there reviewing my notes, the timeline, the transfers, everything I'd carried for 2 years. We waited. Other cases came and went. Attorneys shuffled in and out. The bailiff bought a sandwich. At 6:45, Richard's phone buzzed. They have a verdict. We walked back to the courtroom. Greg and Paul were already seated at the defense table, their attorneys flanking them. Greg's hands were folded on the table, perfectly still. Paul was breathing visibly, chest rising and falling like he'd been running. I took my seat in the gallery. The jury filed in. 12 faces. I tried to read them. Couldn't. Judge Thornton entered. Everyone stood. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman stood. Older man. Retired engineer, if I remembered from selection. We have, Your Honor. Please read the verdict. The foreman unfolded a piece of paper. In the matter of the state of Arizona versus Gregory Castellano, on the charge of embezzlement, we find the defendant guilty. Greg's head dropped. On the charge of elder financial abuse, count 1, we find the defendant guilty. His attorney put a hand on his shoulder. On the charge of elder financial abuse, count 2, we find the defendant guilty. The foreman continued through all charges. Greg, then Paul, guilty, 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 every count. Both defendants. Paul sat completely still, staring straight ahead, expressionless. Greg's shoulders started shaking. Silent, crying. The judge thanked the jury, set sentencing for 3 weeks out. Victim impact statements would be allowed. The gavel came down. It was over. I sat there for a moment, just breathing. For the first time in 8 months, maybe 2 years, I exhaled completely. Not relief exactly, not joy, just release. The weight I'd been carrying, The documentation, the evidence, the constant vigilance. It lifted. Richard touched my arm. "You okay?" I nodded. We left through the side exit. Reporters were waiting outside the main doors. I could have avoided them, gone out the back, but I didn't. I walked to the front. 3 cameras, half a dozen reporters, microphones extended. "Mr. Castellano, how do you feel about the verdict?" I stopped, looked at the cameras. "Justice isn't about revenge," I said. "It's about truth. Today, the truth won. Do you have any message for your sons?" I thought about that. "I hope they learn what I couldn't teach them," I said, "that actions have consequences, that family isn't a shield against accountability, and that the people who love you the most are often the ones you hurt the deepest." "Any regrets?" "Only that it came to this," I said, "but no regrets about pursuing it." I walked to my truck, drove home alone. The house was quiet when I got there. I made dinner, sat on the back patio, watched the sunset over the desert, and I thought about Maria, about what she would have said. I think she'd have been sad, but not surprised. She always knew when people showed you who they were. You had to believe them, even if they were your children, especially then. I looked them in the eye and told them I didn't raise thieves. They chose to become them anyway. 3 weeks later, we were back in court. Same courtroom, same judge, same quiet tension. But this time, it wasn't about guilt. It was about consequences. The prosecution recommended 5 years incarceration, with possibility of parole after 20 months, full restitution, 5 years probation post-release. The defense attorneys pleaded for leniency. First offense, family men, deep remorse, willingness to make amends. Greg's attorney pointed out his children, my grandchildren, who'd lose their father. Paul's attorney mentioned his consulting business, his clients who depended on him. They painted my sons as good men who made bad choices, who deserved a second chance. Judge Thornton listened, made notes, showed nothing. Then she turned to me. "Mr. Castellano, you have the right to make a victim impact statement. Would you like to address the court?" I stood, walked to the podium, and I looked directly at Greg and Paul. "I didn't raise you to be thieves," I said. My voice was steady, calm. "I raised you to be a man of character, to value honesty, to understand that integrity matters more than money." Greg was crying again, silently. Paul stared at the table. "You chose differently," I said. "You chose greed over integrity, lies over honesty. You chose to exploit my grief, dishonor your mother's memory, and steal from the man who gave you everything." I paused. "You didn't just steal money. You stole my trust. You taught your children that family means nothing if there's profit involved. You showed them that when things get hard, you lie." My hands were steady on the podium. "I loved you," I said. "I still do. But love doesn't mean ignoring what you did. It doesn't mean pretending you didn't betray me in the worst way possible." I took a breath. "Your mother would be ashamed, not of me for pursuing this, but of you for making it necessary." Greg's attorney shifted uncomfortably. "I hope prison teaches you what I couldn't," I said. "That actions have consequences, that people, even family, have limits, and that the trust you break can never be fully repaired." I stepped back. "Thank you, Your Honor." Judge Thornton nodded. She took a moment, reviewed her notes. Then she looked at Greg and Paul. "This court takes elder financial abuse seriously," she said, "particularly when it involves exploitation of grief and violation of familial trust." She outlined the sentencing. 5 years incarceration with possibility of parole after 20 months each. Full restitution, $263,600, plus interest and court costs. 5 years supervised probation upon release. Permanent restraining order preventing contact with Victor without his written consent. The gavel came down. Greg was let out first. He looked back once. At me. I didn't look away. Paul followed. Didn't look back at all. And just like that, my sons became inmates. I walked out of the courthouse for the last time. Richard walked with me. "How do you feel?" he asked. I thought about it. "Like I did what needed to be done," I said. "That's not the same as feeling good." "No," I agreed. "It's not. But it was enough. Half the family stopped talking to me. They said I chose money over my sons. I chose honesty over lies. Greg's wife, Amanda, filed for divorce 2 months into his sentence. She didn't blame me, didn't call, didn't explain, just filed the papers and moved forward. She took the kids, Sophie and Michael. I haven't seen them since the trial. Amanda sent one text through Richard. The kids need stability. I hope you understand. I understood. I didn't like it, but I understood. Paul's ex-wife, Christina, sent a letter, handwritten, 3 pages. Dear Victor, I wanted to reach out after the sentencing. I know we haven't spoken much since the divorce, but I needed you to know something. Thank you. Thank you for doing what I never could, holding Paul accountable. During our marriage, he lied constantly, about money, about where he was, about everything. I made excuses. I believed him when I shouldn't have. You didn't. You saw what he was doing and you stopped it. That takes courage I didn't have. I'm sorry for what this cost you, but I'm grateful someone finally made him face consequences. Christina, I read that letter 3 times. I kept it in my desk drawer. Some validation comes from unexpected places. My brother Michael called me heartless, said family forgives, that I'd destroyed Greg and Paul's lives over money. I told him it wasn't about the money. He didn't want to hear it. We haven't spoken since. My sister-in-law, Carol, Maria's sister, stopped inviting me to holidays. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter. I used to get the invitations. Now I don't. Some friends distanced themselves too. People from the country club, guys I played golf with, couples Maria and I used to have dinner with. Family is family, they'd say. You have to forgive. I'd respond, family isn't a free pass to steal. They'd get quiet, change the subject, eventually stop calling. I'm lonelier now than I was after Maria died. Back then, I had Greg and Paul, or I thought I did. Now I have my house, my routines, my memories. Richard still calls once a week, checks in. David, my accountant, invites me to lunch every month. Detective Hollis sent a card after sentencing. You did the right thing. Small validations, but the house is quieter. The holidays are emptier. The phone rings less. I sit on my patio most evenings, watch the sunset, think about the choices I made. And here's what I know. I didn't choose money over my sons. I chose honesty over lies. I chose accountability over enablement. I chose self-respect over being a doormat. Some people can't understand that. They think family means tolerating anything, forgiving everything, pretending harm didn't happen to keep the peace. I don't. When I look in the mirror, I see a man who stood up for himself, who refused to be a victim, who chose truth even when it cost him relationships. That's something I can live with. The loneliness is hard, but living a lie would have been harder. I didn't leave them $1, but I made sure my grandchildren would know what integrity looks like. 6 months after sentencing, I met with Richard to finalize my estate plan. The old will had split everything between Greg and Paul, equal shares, $12 million divided 2 ways. That version died the day they walked into his office claiming I had dementia. Talk me through what you want, Richard said. I pulled out notes. I'd thought about this carefully. Greg and Paul get nothing, I said. Complete disinheritance. I want language that makes it clear this is intentional, not an oversight. Richard wrote it down. The estate's worth about $11.7 million after restitution. I continued. Here's the breakdown. I slid the paper across his desk. 40%, roughly $4.7 million, goes to my grandchildren, Sophie, Michael, and any others. In trust. They can't access it until they're 25. Independent trustee manages it until then. Who's the trustee? You, if you're willing. Richard nodded. I'm willing. 30%, about $3.5 million, goes to charity. Specifically, scholarship funds for first-generation college students, kids whose parents didn't go to college but who want to. I thought about my own father, immigrant, construction worker, never finished high school, pushed me to get educated. I want those kids to have a chance, I said. Understood. 20%, $2.4 million, goes to Carol, Maria's sister. She's been there through all of this. Quiet support, no judgment. Richard made notes. And the last 10%? he asked. I want to establish a nonprofit, financial literacy education, teach people, especially seniors, how to protect themselves from exploitation, how to document, how to recognize warning signs, how to fight back. I paused. Call it the Maria Castellano Foundation. Richard looked up. She would have liked that, he said quietly. She would have, I agreed. He finished writing. Victor, you're sure about the disinheritance? If they contest, let them try, I said. I've got documentation, the conviction, the victim impact statement. Any judge would uphold it. They will be upset. They've been upset, I said. What matters is my grandchildren see this. Someday, when they're old enough, I want them to understand. Understand what? That their grandfather didn't reward theft, that character matters, that you can love someone and still hold them accountable. I leaned back. Greg and Paul wanted my money. They tried to take it by force, by lies, by declaring me incompetent. I looked at Richard. Now they'll spend the rest of their lives knowing they got nothing, and watching people who earned respect through character benefit instead. Richard closed his folder. I'll draft it this week. Thank you. I signed the new will 10 days later. Greg and Paul don't know yet. Won't know until I'm gone. But when that day comes, and the will is read, they'll understand. They bet their inheritance on me being too weak to fight back. They lost that bet. And the cost wasn't just prison. It was everything. If you're watching this and wondering if you did the right thing, ask yourself, did you choose truth or comfort? I think about that question often. Would I do it again? Yes, without hesitation. If I could tell another father facing betrayal anything, it's this: document everything. Trust your instincts. Don't let guilt silence you. And remember that love without accountability isn't love. It's enabling. I still love my sons, but I love them from a distance they created. I hope they change. I hope prison teaches them something. I hope they become better men. But hope doesn't mean pretending the past didn't happen. It doesn't mean forgetting they stole from me. It means acknowledging reality while staying open to redemption. I think of Maria often. Wonder what she'd say. I believe she'd understand. The hardest part wasn't pressing charges. It was accepting that the sons I raised chose a path I couldn't follow them down. That's the grief that remains. In the end, it's a reminder that family bonds can fracture, but personal integrity endures. Not the money, not the trial, but the loss of who I thought they were. If you made it this far, I want to thank you for listening. This wasn't an easy story to tell, and I know it wasn't easy to hear, but if it helped even one person find the courage to stand up for themselves, to refuse to be a victim, to demand accountability from people who betrayed them, then it mattered. Before you go, do me one last favor. Hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and whether you've ever had to choose between family loyalty and personal integrity. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone dealing with family betrayal, financial exploitation, or just trying to figure out if they're doing the right thing, share it with them. We're all just trying to navigate this life with our dignity intact. Sometimes that means making hard choices. Sometimes it means standing alone. But it always means choosing truth over comfort. Take care of yourselves out there. And remember, you're worth fighting for, even when the people you're fighting are the ones you love most.